guys, it's Jacob from Stringbuzz here, stringbuzzworld.org being the music journalism site. Links are in the description down below. And we have a brand new discursive type topic for you today, and it's experimentation is the new in thing. So I'm going to refer to the original article which I've just posted to the site, so I hope you enjoy. Now, if you've been following the site or the YouTube channel for a little while now, you would already know how I feel about experimentation in modern music, in the modern music scene. For me, it's fantastic and it's at an all-time high. In fact, I said my main reason for 2016 being a good year for music has to be based around experimental music and its grasp over every genre. Although you still have trending artists and artists out there who still release the same repackaged nonsense and crap every single week, I think there are a growing number of major artists now who are looking at the upwards climb for experimental music and wanting to incorporate that upwards climb into their own sound. Sure, some do it better than others, but that's the whole idea behind being experimental. You try new things and you see what works. For this time, however, experimentation had sort of died down from the early 2000s up until around 2015 or so. People preferred to listen to music that was a little bit more direct and cut the crap out of it. That's why punk had a resurgence. That's why nu metal came into being. That's why pop music used samples and impactful low ends. And that's why general rock music took on a grungier, more metallic state. That did lead to great groups emerging with this no-nonsense style, especially over here in the UK, but unfortunately that music gets a little bit old a little too fast. The punk thing sort of divulged quickly into being pop punk, which ended up being a bit of a flash in the pan. The nu metal scene practically depleted itself by 2010, and the pop music scene became pretty darn mundane. Song form took a real battering around this point, and it meant that people didn't want to use a bridge or a middle eighth or anything like that anymore, because the chorus vocal point would be better to be repeated once or twice more rather than actually varying things up. That's what people wanted to listen to, and that's why people wrote it, for people to want to listen to it as many times as possible in one runtime. Although pop punk has sort of kicked itself back into gear now over here in the UK, it's going to be a while now for it to establish itself on such a big platform again. The time 2010 had hit, however, pop music was really at a bit of a low. Organic instrumentation was non-existent, songs were more like glorified nursery rhymes with choruses and verses being the only content to really hold on to. Hooks became one or two words, the beat was usually copy and pasted, and everything was immensely simplistic. This did lead to some catchy moments, I'm not saying that it didn't, and I'm not saying that it was all bad either, but the overall quality of music had taken a huge step back from where it once was. When electronic music became the real seller in the charts, etc., etc., pop jumped on that bandwagon too and stripped the timbres and intricacies away from great electronic tracks that we never really had, and instead made it more globally accessible, which would be fine, but once you strip an electronic track of character and personality, you've got a pretty robotic sounding song which is pretty darn boring. However, when all of this did start to take shape, indie music, prog music, jazz fusion music and soundtrack music began to really rise. Those who didn't like the mega simplistic pop climate of the time turned to things that were practically polar opposite. Indie music used incredibly raw and organic instrumentation with lyrical content that was diverse, imaginative and exploratory. Prog had a huge popular comeback with the likes of Animals as Leaders, Pliny, Sithu I and even Tesseract leading the new wave of hyper-technical music. Jazz fusion began to leak its way into many genres, carrying a complexity and a new way of making music that we hadn't seen for many years, and for that we have the likes of Chon to thank for. But the biggie for me has to be soundtrack music. As musical scores and film soundtracks became more commercially recognised, as well as successful, selling a lot more, they began to influence a whole range of artists from every single background. Looking outside the realms of composers and movie scores, names that spring to mind are people like Nordic Giants, Cinematic Orchestra, and maybe even the XX. And sure, these groups, with the exception of the XX, might not be household names, but I'm sure they are recognised quite prominently in the brand new and improved music scene. What do I mean by this new and improved music scene? Well, pop artists began to note this polar opposite switch which a lot of reviewers and music fans were beginning to highlight. Sure, this didn't reflect in sales or concert tickets, but it did begin to become quite obvious that people began to grow a disliking towards temporary music. Artists that had become too comfortable with one sound and got bored of the art form themselves began to actually develop and felt they had to develop as artists. I mean, looking at Miley Cyrus, for example, she's has released music in at least 4 different, completely different, in fact, styles in the last 7 years alone. Sure, some moments have been pretty terrible and teeth-grindingly bad, but she has developed, and now she's genuinely seen as more unpredictable musically as she even is as a person. Now, we are beginning to have pop music that incorporates big, anthemic instrumentation, creating a huge soundscape for the track's content to fill. Now we have pop music with jerky and strange time signatures that incorporate wild syllabic behavior and unusual rhythmic developments. Now we have pop tracks that possess lyrics that are based around a huge range of topics, making the songs that bit more meaningful once again. Gloss over some recent but great examples. Look at how Katy Perry has just released a retro disco Caribbean dancehall fusion track called Chained to the Rhythm featuring a reggae artist. Look at how Nickelback have just released a genty, progressive, aggressive metal track like Feed the Machine. You wouldn't expect that from them a couple years ago. Look at the rise of artists like Aquilo, Kendrick Lamar, Childish Gambino, Reggie Snow, Declan McKenna, Maggie Rogers, and even Solange. People who take what's popular and transform it into technical marvels that tell stories and are complex and imaginative. These artists are all progressive, inventive, positive, and now are being recognised in a big way on both the charts as well as in award ceremonies. I mean, place the likes of Kendrick Lamar and Childish Gambino next to Drake, Flo Rida, N-Dubz, will.i.am, and Pitbull. There is just no comparison there, and yet they're only about 7 years apart musically. And then if you place the likes of Maggie Rogers and Solange next to Tayo Cruz, Ayaz, Cheryl Cole, and Pixie Lott, guess what? There is no comparison there, and yet they're only around 7 years apart musically. Place Aquilo next to David Guetta, Swedish House Mafia, and Yolanda Be Cool, and again, there is no comparison there, yet they're just a few years apart. Yet all these artists are successful in their own rights and are all close or already are being used as household names. Music for me is ahead another 20 years from where it was just a couple years ago, and that's largely down to a focus on experimentation and development. When I say it's the new in thing, it genuinely is, because a lot of artists now are only being recognised if they create something truly special from the first moment. Not direct, not mundane, not simplistic, something really noteworthy and memorable. The charts obtain a huge percentage of experimental tracks that are really out of your ordinary format, and people like Solange, Gorgiera, Periphery, and Baroness are all being nominated for, or even winning Grammys. Now sure, that mundane, crappy, simple stuff is still about today in a big way, but my goodness, has it taken a fall from grace recently. Give it another 10 years or so, and I'd like to see where the music scene has shifted, and I bet tracks like TikTok and Ride In Solo won't be nearly as successful as they once were. So if you like this video, then please leave a like, comment what you think in the comment section down below, whether you're a fan of experimental music or not, or where you think the music scene is going. And like I said, subscribe, and I'll see you around next time. Bye bye.